Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on our recent OpenBlue research report. The Q&A allows you to submit questions directly to us on the OpenBlue side, and we'll follow up with those after the fact. We definitely encourage you to introduce yourself. We love to know who's out in the audience, where you're joining us from, as well as your functional role in your organization. We work with so many different types of people, and it's always great to know who's out there in the audience. And so on that note, we will introduce ourselves. My name is Jennifer Heath. I lead the product marketing team for OpenBlue Digital Solutions at Johnson Controls. I was originally with FM Systems, which I'm sure many of you are familiar. Johnson Controls acquired us a couple of years ago, and we are now fully integrated into the OpenBlue division, and we have lots of exciting things to talk about today. I've been in the workplace management industry almost 20 years, and I love talking about these different trends and the way things are changing. We have some interesting things to talk about. Stephen, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jen, and good morning, good afternoon to you all. This is not common. This is sunshine and blue skies here in London in March. So welcome to the blue skies. I'm Stephen Pyatt, and I'm part of the strategy team here at OpenBlue. I joined the organisation a couple of years ago, and I came in from financial services industry, where I was the client. I was rolling out workplace technologies globally to my customers, the occupants of buildings. So I bring the client perspective and the customer perspective often to the table. So good morning, good afternoon to you all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephen. We're going to start off today talking a little bit about the foundation for today's webinar, which is our research report. This is our 4th or 5th consecutive year of doing this survey, and it always yields really interesting results and gives us so much insight into what's really happening in the real world. We surveyed over 700 business leaders in different industries across the US, as well as almost 300 facility managers in those same organizations. And it's really interesting to see the different priorities and the different concerns between organizational leadership and the facility managers. And we're going to start off today with a poll question. It's always interesting for us to see how the audience results compare to our survey results. So our first poll question: what would you most like to change about your current workplace management system? Ease of integration, ease of use, cost, scalability, reliability, or ease of maintenance? And so we will wait just a moment for those poll results to come in.
There's a theme there, isn't there, Jen, around the integration with other software and solutions. Okay.
Yeah, by far, ease of integration is the winner. We're at 53%, and then just a scattering across the other options there. And that absolutely lines up with what we saw in our own survey.
Definitely. Reliability, 2%. I think people just expect things to be reliable now. So that's probably why that's such a low marker there.
All right. So it does align with our findings from our survey, with 33% of business leaders saying integration is their number one challenge. Stephen, is that what you're hearing in your experience?
Absolutely. I think it's that friction point where the data integrations and the interoperability with other systems in the facility. It may be just your people systems having your HR data coming into your workplace system, or connecting your work order management system with your building management system, or space management scenario planning with your resource booking platform. It is that interoperability, that integration, bring data together into one workplace management system, so you can actually start to solve for the enterprise, for the workplace.
One aspect of this particular finding that I found interesting, 85% of respondents use some kind of workplace management technology. Technology is certainly everywhere and in all of our different workflows. But then the question really does become, how do you start to tie some of this data together? We've talked for years about the importance of multi data point analysis, the idea that analyzing a single metric or making a decision based on a single KPI is limited. You need to aggregate data, bring together different data sets so that you get that richer view of what's really happening. But today, the importance of that data is really going beyond just the analysis and the understanding. And I'm teeing us up for our second key finding here. 65% of business leaders and 61% of facility managers want to use AI. They plan to implement AI in the next year. And that is why some of this data integration is so important. When we think about artificial intelligence, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't function independently. It is only as good as the data that is underlying. And so when you think about data integration, the types of data sets you have, ensuring the quality of your data, it's no longer just about analysis. It's now really about how are you going to drive your AI strategy. And so, how are people planning to use AI? 45% of business leaders and 51% of facility managers want to leverage AI for preventative maintenance. And I think this is spot on. This feels like the most obvious, the low hanging fruit. This is an area where AI can make such an impact just by being able to detect those anomalies sooner. Slight changes in temperature over time, slight variations in vibrational frequencies over time are indicators of oncoming problems. And so it allows you to sort of look into the future a little bit and start to understand where you might have challenges before they have become a challenge. You can detect a problem before you have an equipment failure. You have better insight into your equipment performance over time, and you're able to make better decisions around repair versus replace. It's all about ensuring efficiency, guaranteeing uptime, and being able to predict those problem points before they become major disruptive problems. Stephen, what are your thoughts here?
Definitely, predictive maintenance is coming out loud and clear. There's one of the key value drivers that AI can enable for the facilities management team. I think it also allows people that real insight. You talked earlier about keeping the lights on with the technology, with the system, or replacing it. Helps inform that capital planning budget process as well. Really helping FMs and the organization keeping that building uptime and performance and optimization of the plant and the building. That's key to all of this. I think it also allows us to move away from those old rules of thumb where we did everything on a planned maintenance module. We always hear that scenario. You change your oil every 6 months because that's what you always did. Well, now this is based upon analyzing how the assets are being sweated, how they're being used, and being able to run to the noise and being able to solve for problems far, far quicker. Real insight, faster response, and better coordination, I guess, are really the key things here. And ultimately, coming up through the sector, through the industry, we hear that there's a lack of resources coming through into the industry now, and therefore being able to do more with less people is of value as well. Not replace FMs, but be able to pivot and being able to be agile with the resources you do have to be able to be more effective in the buildings.
Absolutely. I love that because there is, of course, a concern that AI is going to take all of our jobs, right? I mean, it's impossible not to sort of think about that. But what's important here is realizing that AI is it's a new partner on the team. It's able to do things that other people couldn't do, and it's enabling your building and your equipment to communicate with you directly. The building itself becomes a part of the solution, not just the standalone problem. And I think that's really powerful to think about. I also think it's interesting some of the other priorities that we saw in this survey. Integrated workplace experience platforms. We're continuing to digitize that workplace experience. Environmental monitoring and air quality solutions continue to be very important. And then, of course, getting into decarbonization, thinking about digital twins. There's so much in the technology ecosystem that we can do. But I love that this is where people want to start. All right, let's move on. Key finding number 3. Stephen and I both are particularly fond of this one. Stephen, I'll let you take the first crack at it.
People have got into the new normal. The new normal is now here. And is it any different to pre-COVID? Perhaps might be the question. You know, in 2018, 2019, people were already talking about flexible working, different days at home, different days in the office. Coming out of COVID, we've had the mandates, we've had the big return to the office, we've had the big resignation as well era. People are now in their new normals, and I think it's fair to say the organisations have got into their routines, and the spaces have all been, to a certain extent, have probably been optimised from a lease perspective for the last few years. And now people are focusing on the current build, making sure that they're optimising, continually pivoting in their spaces, so they're offering great environments for their colleagues when they come in, understanding what their average utilisation, what their peak utilisation is. If there's a change in business drivers, can they now shift and pivot people coming into the buildings on different days and really making the most out of it? But I think the new normal is stabilizing, isn't it, Jen, is what we're hearing, really.
Definitely. I think we've seen this pendulum swing in the last few years from fully remote to hybrid, return to office mandates, incentives to bring people back into the office. It's been this sort of ongoing conversation the last few years. And we did a webinar back in December where we talked about sort of our predictions for, what 2026 was going to look like. And one of my predictions was that we were going to stop talking about incentives. We were going to stop talking about mandates because people had settled into their strategy. Organizations know what they want and need, what they want their culture to be like. And employees now understand that there are choices. Some people want to be in the office 5 days a week. Other people, I think particularly working parents, really appreciate the flexibility of a hybrid work strategy. And so I think everyone has kind of settled on what works for them. And so now we can focus on how do we make that strategy work for our business? How do we ensure that we have the right amount of real estate, that we're optimizing the space that we have? If you only have people in the office 3 days a week, are you effectively managing your heating and cooling and lighting on those days that have lower utilization? We have to really think about it more holistically now. It's not just about the individual employee experience, but what are the patterns and how can we harness that understanding to improve the utilization of the space, the optimization of the space, but most importantly, to control the costs. You don't want to pay for all this real estate if it's not being used. You don't want to pay to power a building 60 hours a week if it's not being utilized in that way. And so I think we're moving past talking about what we're going to do. And now we have accepted where we are and we're looking at what technology, what solutions, what strategies are occupants. something else I'll say on this one, because I think it's interesting. There was a lot of interest in leveraging sensors and different technology to understand what that utilization was in that very transitionary time when we didn't really understand how many people were coming in, how many people were remote or in the office. Now that we've settled into these strategies, that technology is still so important in understanding what kind of space your employees need, right? So when you had a lot of flexibility, it was important to have touchdown spaces and a lot of collaborative spaces. If you have more people that are in the office all the time, you have to think more about having those private offices, having places where people can have confidential conversations. Do you have the right amount of collaborative space versus heads down space? And I think the technology still is so important in informing those decisions, no matter what the strategy is.
And also providing new types of spaces. If I think about the work many organizations do in understanding their indoor air quality, but also the noise and the environmental conditions within the building, being able to offer different spaces for the neurodivergent agenda to support people in the workplace is equally as important. So I think it does help us now bring the conversation back into a more utopian experiential topic, yeah, because people are no longer thinking about all of the lease disposals and the building disposals. They're now looking at optimizing. And it's interesting how we heard about the AI driven like predictive maintenance components on the last slide, where the facilities team are looking to leverage AI in the workplace. We should also be giving our colleagues and occupants agentic AI to help them as their co-worker in navigating those spaces as well. So I think that as the employee attendance patterns have settled down, it is that real opportunity to go into the new paradigm with greater technology to support the new ways of working.
Yes, I think AI in the realm of scheduling is fascinating to me, because I think everyone has had that experience of, I can't find a time slot that works for everyone. I can't get everyone connected on their time zones. We don't have the right kind of space. I think it's going to be interesting to see how AI evolves to make that a much, much smoother experience.
Definitely, definitely.
Okay, let's see. We are ready for our next poll question. What aspects of your facilities would you most like to have more data and insights about? And a variety of different choices here. I'll be really interested to see where this one comes out. All right, so we have, oh, it's changing really quickly. So we have right now, workplace experience is in the lead, energy use and efficiency performance, equipment health, asset performance. I'll give it just another minute to let the rest of the results come in. So there's not really a clear winner. So we have workplace experience at 28%, energy use at 24%, and then equipment health and asset performance both at 20%. This is interesting because it's a little bit different than what we found in our survey.
But actually, when I look at some of our attendees' job profiles today, as they've introduced themselves, there's a broad mix across both the maintenance element, the overall facilities management components, facilities maintenance, again, technical facilities. So it's interesting how different personas within the facilities management operations have that different viewpoint.
So in our survey, we had We had it spread out across a variety, but energy performance and efficiency was the top response at 20%. And then it was like 18, 16, 15 across all the others. Everything else was fairly close. But energy performance was the top concern. That was the main area where they wanted more data. And the reason for it was rising energy costs. That was the number one response on what was their biggest concern in managing their facilities, and it was rising energy costs. So it makes sense that better understanding your energy performance, your efficiency levels, that's the first step in controlling those costs.
And that's interesting because in prior years, it's been around the need to report from an energy sustainability goal perspective, yeah, from a CO2 perspective, being able to report because a lot of our respondents to the survey, they have obligations to their regulators to report around their commitments as well. So it's interesting that fluctuation between cost and regulation as to the drivers.
Yes, the reporting side of it has always been a driver because there is potentially fines and penalties if you are out of compliance. And so that is a really important part of it. That's an aspect of gathering that data. But to then be able to apply it to, okay, now that I have this data, now that I understand, how can we improve that efficiency? How can we improve that performance so that we can counterbalance some of this increase in cost? And it does go back a little bit to what we were saying about using AI for preventative
Absolutely.
maintenance, thinking about how do you optimize your usage and your strategy, really understanding what's happening inside your building gives you more levers to pull in terms of are there days of the week that we could power down to a smaller area? The more you can understand about that day-to-day activity. And I think it's interesting too to think about like a symbiotic relationship there, that if you improve your energy strategy, your energy management strategy, and you're able to bring down those costs, simultaneously, you're going to be bringing down your emissions. It's the best 2-for-1 deal out there. And I really think that's an interesting angle that you can get so much out of a more effective energy management strategy.
Definitely, and it comes back to, we were talking earlier about those workplace technologies, the sensoring of the space. All of that plays into this. Being able to, as you mentioned, being able to move colleagues to certain other floors on days of the week where the building is less busy, absolutely makes sense. But it's having the right technology strategy to enable that. But ultimately, it's about being leaner and smoother with your building operations. But yeah, I love how this ties back into the point you were making around the predictive maintenance, environmental monitoring, real insight, faster response to being able to maintain your plant, maintain your operations as efficiently as possible.
We have a question here in the chat, predictive maintenance needs. I think one of the things here that is interesting is the sensorization of that equipment, being able to monitor and maintain what that performance is over time. But it creates an interesting challenge, and this is detailed in the report. I definitely encourage everyone to take the time to read through the report. There are so many interesting statistics there. But one of the things that is raised in the report is the challenge of cybersecurity for your operational technology. And it is becoming a very hot topic just across all industries, because we want to be able to sensorize all of this different equipment so that we can amass that data. We can start to be smarter and use applied AI for that preventative maintenance. But it means all of your equipment is now connected. There are networks on the other side, and it has become a real vulnerability that facility managers have to be very thoughtful about. And there are a number of different solutions and products. We have an operational technology cyber solution. And it was a very popular topic at IFMA this last year in Minneapolis I believe it was in September. I heard a number of people talking about that, the vulnerability there of having all this connected technology and the importance of facility managers and IT coming together to really counter that threat and that challenge, because we want to have everything digitized, we want to have everything connected, but you have to be aware of what's on the other side of that, and that is that cyber security challenge. So I would be interested to know, folks in the chat, if you would be interested in posting that. Is that something that you're thinking about? Does it make it more difficult to advance some of your technology goals because you're having to also consider this counter cybersecurity issue?
And while we wait for respondents to record, I personally, I remember walking through the basements of buildings, disconnecting building management systems from what was perceived to be the network, because it was that hop-on point for a bad actor to do a bad thing. So I've definitely done the disconnect, and then at the same time had a strategy around how do you make your building smarter? Well, it needs to be connected, and there's that real dichotomy between, as you say, being cyber safe but being connected as well, and choosing the right integration layer, the right network layer by which to connect these workplace technologies through. I think it's just, as colleagues are saying here, it's yeah, cybersecurity and having full incident response plans. Yeah, having to be aware and plan for it. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. It's I'm sure a huge topic in airports, because that would be an area where you could be extremely disruptive if you were a bad actor. I think that's a really interesting call out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is, and I feel like we've talked about this in other areas. Something I expect to see over the next year is a much tighter relationship between IT and facility management. And I think historically, facility managers, it's more of a hands-on sort of a job, right? It's very much about managing the equipment. But in the last few years, it has really evolved to be a much more technical role where you're doing this data analysis, where you do have to understand these cybersecurity threats. And it's interesting to me, the convergence of AI, all the potential applications, the need for the data underneath it, but then also recognizing that there is this cybersecurity layer, and you have to expand really the breadth and the scope of your management teams to ensure that you're accounting for all these different things. So we're coming up on time here, but that's really my big takeaway from this report is we have the potential to integrate all this data. We have the potential to apply AI to all these different scenarios and gain all of these efficiencies, but it's going to require a different level of collaboration across our organizations to ensure that we're doing it safely.
Definitely, definitely.
Any other final thoughts from you, Stephen, as we wrap it up here?
Embrace AI. It's here to support us, but embrace it as our co-worker, as our colleague, our digital colleagues. I think that's the pure opportunity here, and to help us become better at communicating and around decision making to support the business goals that you're all driving for.
Wonderful. That brings us right to our time. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Stephen and I always love to have these conversations. If you would like to continue the conversation, please certainly feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're both out on LinkedIn and all the channels, and love to connect and better understand the challenges that you're experiencing, the unique ways technology is supporting you, and how we can better support you as we move our solutions forward. And today's session has been recorded. We will send that out to you as a follow-up, as well as a link to the full research report, so you have all this great data available to you as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.